you see movies and they can be full of vision, and you want your movies to be like that. But you see these other movies that don't have any vision, but I'm sure the director tried. So what's the difference between this guy versus that guy? How was this guy able to get this on the screen, and how was this guy not able to get this on the screen?
What's up? It's Chris, the Drone Geek, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Drones. Today we are going over 7 tips for you to get better cinematic footage out of your drone. It does not matter what you are flying, within reason. You could be flying a Mavic 2 Zoom, Mavic 2 Pro, the Phantom, the Autel Evo, the Sky Dio, whatever. Any prosumer level drone or higher, these tips are going to help you out tremendously when it comes to getting that cinematic look and feel to your footage. Before we get started though, remember if you haven't already to hit that subscribe button down below. It helps my channel out tremendously. We are on the quest to 1,000 subscribers. We've been hovering in the low 740s for quite some time, and I would like to see that ceiling broken. We'll see if it goes that way, but your help is greatly appreciated. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below. Starting our list off at number 1, plan your shots ahead of time. This is the first of 7 strategies for more cinematic drone footage that I have for you today, but it's probably the most important. My drone footage took a huge step up in quality the day that I started planning my shots out ahead of time, and it's as simple as this. Think about the project at hand, whether it's a leisure project for yourself or a project for a client. What kind of message is it trying to convey? How can your drone shots help to better convey that message? Jot down the shots that you want on a table. Make room for columns for takes, good takes, bad takes, great takes, and even plain old ugly takes, and then take that with you to the shoot. You use this visual aid that you've created with a description of all the shots that you have to keep track of the takes of each shot. When you're flying your drone, your number 1 responsibility is to make sure that it is navigating the airspace safely. You don't want to have to commit brain power to keeping track of all of the shots that you need up here. If you have that visual aid that you can glance at very quickly and confirm whether or not you have a shot and whether or not it's a good or great take versus a bad or ugly take, helps you out tremendously in not being distracted from the task at hand, which is your drone in the air. Trust me, if you start planning your shots out ahead of time, you're going to see a big jump in the quality of your drone footage. Let's move on to point number 2. Always, and I mean always, pinch the sticks. In general, there are 2 types of remote pilots. There are thumbers and there are pinchers. I am a pincher, and I suggest that you be a pincher too. Now, you may be thinking, thumbers? Pinchers? What in tarnation are you blabbering on about? And that's totally fair. Here's what I mean. When holding your drone's remote controller, there are 2 techniques that are widely practiced by drone pilots for manipulating the joysticks. Thumbers take the pads of their thumbs, right here, this part of your thumb, and they place them over top of the joystick. By rolling their thumb in the opposite direction they want their drone to move, that allows the stick to be pushed that way because they're putting pressure downward with their thumbs. Pinchers use their thumb and forefinger on each joystick and pinch the sides. They then extend and contract their thumb and forefinger respectively to manipulate the joysticks. Oh, and there's one other group that I forgot to mention, the pinky pushers, but quite frankly, they're Neanderthals and they don't really deserve to breathe the same air that we breathe, so let's just move on. Oh. Sorry. But why is being a pincher better than a thumber? Well, it all comes down to dexterity and the level of control that you have over your remote controller. Thumbers have less touch when it comes to manipulating the joysticks because you're using a single point on each digit to control the joystick. And it's a little awkward anyway because you're putting downward pressure on the joysticks that are these very long, thin mechanisms, and it just doesn't add up to very fine control and dexterity. You can learn to get by as a thumber and put together some pretty cool movements, but overall, you're not going to have the same level of dexterity as a pincher. When you pinch your joysticks, you're taking the joystick by the sides. You have 2 points of control between this finger and your thumb, and you're able to better manipulate the joysticks and have finer control. That means more subtle movements, that means a wider range of motion, and you have firmer control over how fast or slow those adjustments take place. Overall, pinching gives you a much finer level of control than thumbing does. So if you're not currently using the pinch method while flying your drone, I highly recommend that you start doing that right now. It may feel a little awkward at first, but once you get the hang of it and the feel for it, you're never going to look back. It's going to take your piloting up a notch, and you're gonna have so much more fun flying because you're gonna have a higher level of control over your drone. Always be a pincher, avoid being a thumber, and for the love of everything that is good and holy, never, ever be a pinky pusher. Sorry. Number 3, whenever possible, always shoot at 4K and 30 frames per second. I'll level with you. This one is controversial. There are so many different opinions on this one, and I can already hear the keys just clacking away by people that are gonna give me a rift for saying that you need to be shooting at 4K and 30 frames per second. But deep down inside, you, yes, I'm talking to you, the one sitting there about to type that hateful comment about shooting at 4K and 30 frames per second, you know deep down that I'm right. It's better, with drones anyway, to shoot at 4K and 30 frames per second. You know it deep down, just accept it. Here's the deal, and here's my point of view on this particular topic. There are a lot of different ways to view this topic and a lot of different techniques used in this particular category. However, the reason that I shoot at 4K and 30 frames per second is because you tend to get much better, smoother, and crisper footage from a drone at 4K and 30 frames per second. When you shoot at 24 frames per second, you can sometimes run into some problems with some frames dropping and it becoming a little bit choppy as the drone footage carries on. This actually has a counter effect against what 24 frames per second usually achieves, which is real life motion, that cinematic feel where you feel like the person is right in front of you, because largely our eyes process data at the same rate as approximately 24 or 25 frames per second. But from the eye of a drone at 24 frames per second, you can sometimes get a choppy and distorted feel from your footage. And when you're trying to shoot something cinematic, the last thing you want is an unnatural feel. Nobody wants that. And here's the thing, if you're putting together a project that is going to be exported at 24 frames per second in the final form, you can always take the drone footage that you shot at 30 frames per second and slow it down to 80.8%. So that'd be 80.8% of the original speed, and you'll roughly get the same feel as a clip that was captured at 24 frames per second. Also, if you're shooting drone footage to license out to people to buy and then use in their projects, shooting at a higher frame rate actually gives that clip more versatility. In post-production, you can adjust the frame rate, whether it's through the export or the speed of the clip, you can always adjust the frame rate down, but you can't adjust the frame rate up. So if you shoot at 24 frames per second, that's it. You can't bump that up to 30 frames per second and get a very natural looking clip. It's going to be choppy, you're gonna have dropped frames, it's just going to look terrible if you take a 24 frames per second clip and then export it from a project that is shot at 30 frames per second. However, if you do the inverse, take 30 and export it down into 24, you can still accomplish a very cinematic feel. Yes, I understand that the industry standard is 24 frames per second for cinematic footage. Yes, I understand that when you shoot 24 frames per second, you are automatically meeting the standard of cinematic feel in your footage. However, drones are a different beast. It's a little bit different, the movement of the camera is a little bit different, and you need to account for that. So shooting at 30 frames per second gives you a very smooth clip out of the camera, and you can always adjust the frame rate afterwards by either slowing the clip down or exporting the project out at 24 frames per second. We all have opinions and they all stink. Moving on. Number 4, make deliberate but smooth movements. When you are filming with your drone, you want to move the drone with purpose. When you've got the camera rolling and that drone is up in the air, you want to make sure that every movement feels intentional, because if it doesn't, the viewer is going to pick up on that immediately. How many times have you been on social media and you see one of your friends that's sort of an amateur drone pilot flying their drone and they've got this really nice shot put together, and then all of a sudden it just jerks to the left really hard and really suddenly. It just sort of takes you out of that cinematic feeling that you had just a moment ago. That's because it feels like the drone pilot is panicking, even though they might not be. It feels like the drone pilot doesn't really know what it's trying to capture, and it's just herky-jerky all over the place. Remember, move your drone with intention and purpose, even if you're just winging it. I know that goes against point number 1, where we talked about planning your shots out, but the bottom line is, our friend in the boxing world, Mike Tyson, said it best.
My style is impetuous, my defense is impregnable, and I'm just ferocious. I want your heart, I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
No, not that one. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. You're going to be planning your shots out, but the fact of the matter is you can plan until you're blue in the face. Sometimes it doesn't always go according to plan. Remember, you're flying out in nature, so the weather could change, the wind pattern could shift, any number of things could happen. For God's sakes, an animal could get in the way of your drone. There are a million things that could happen to your drone or around your drone that will affect the nature of capturing the clips that you want to capture. It's important to remember that no matter how far off the beaten path your drone shots are getting, to always move with intention, because it's going to make it feel like everything that you're doing was planned from the start. No matter if there are a million interferences around it, if you move with intention, avoid the herky-jerky, and avoid sudden drone movements, your viewer is going to feel like everything that's happening was meant to happen. And that only enhances that cinematic feeling. Number 5, always have a payoff. Every good drone shot should have a payoff. Now, that payoff may come immediately with just this absolutely gorgeous landscape, or the point of interest is front and center through the entire shot, but it could also have a payoff that happens later in the clip. For instance, you start by blocking the point of interest out and then slowly revealing it to the viewer. Why is it important to have a payoff? Well, first off, the point of any multimedia project, whether it's audio, video, or a combination of the two, is that your viewer walks away having gained something from the project, whether it's learning something, being entertained, whatever the case may be. So a payoff helps you to accomplish this goal. However, it's also important to have a payoff because largely, drone shots are not that interesting when they don't have some sort of a payoff. I know. One of the YouTube drone guys just said that drone shots aren't that cool, but that doesn't mean that I don't love drones. I do. I live, sleep, eat, and breathe drones. I love everything about them, and I love the images that they capture. But the fact of the matter is, I understand that it is very hard to tell a compelling story with a drone. It takes a true imagination to tell a story with just a drone clip. You need something to supplement it, and that's why drone shots are largely supplemental. They help to tell the story, but it's hard for them to tell the entire story. That is how a drone is most powerful, by helping to tell a story. Number 6, do a dry run. This one is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure that you show up at least an hour before your shoot is scheduled. This will allow you, if you have the battery capacity, to put the drone up in the air and practice the shots that you need. Now, there's a huge advantage to doing this. One, you get a feel for the environment in which you're flying, as well as the opportunity to capture drone footage before the shoot is actually scheduled. This is barring a shoot where you have an actual subject that will be there at a specific specific time. So if you're just capturing landscape, or there's a fixed point of interest or subject that you can capture anytime, that's the best way to make sure you get the absolute most out of your shoot. Budget and account for showing up at least an hour early to do some dry runs. And who knows, if you're recording during those dry runs, you might get some really great shots before the shoot's even scheduled to start. You can show up the day before a shoot to do a dry run, but remember, you're flying outside, so the conditions outside can change, whether it's weather, wind patterns, the humidity, the thickness of the air. All of those play a factor in how well your drone handles. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're doing a dry run the day before and not the day of the shoot. Practice makes perfect. Correction. Perfect practice makes perfect. And number 7, let the shot come to you. This last point is arguably, against number 1, the most important in high-level output with your drone and having fun with your drone. Just let the shots come to you. I know there is a ton of pressure on drone pilots to capture the exact moment something happens, or to get that really cinematic, cool feeling shot from the sky. But the fact of the matter is, if you put any more pressure on yourself in this already high pressure position, you're not going to have fun flying your drone. And that is the key to getting good cinematic drone shots. Having fun and just staying loose. If you put these 7 tips that we just went over in practice while you're flying your drone, I promise you will see an uptick in the quality of your drone video. And as you continue to practice these 7 strategies, you're going to get a more cinematic feel off of that footage. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button down below. And if you really liked this video, hit that subscribe button. As I said at the beginning of this video, we are on the quest to 1,000 subscribers, and I cannot do it without you. So if you've already hit the subscribe button, go and tell a couple friends to come here and subscribe, especially if you know they like drones and especially drone multimedia. Maybe they want to learn a little something too. We've got something for everybody here if you like drones, or if you have even the slightest interest in drones. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. If you have, tell 2 friends to come here and hit that subscribe button. And maybe they'll tell 2 friends to come and hit the subscribe button. Who knows? My point is, we want to get to 1,000 subscribers. So this is your second reminder to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, I'm Chris, the Drone Geek, and I am out of here.
My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
Are you saying now, Mike?
That's right.